Have you ever wondered why stories about dark, macabre, or chilling events are fascinating? Well, I believe that some of us are hardwired to survive, and that wiring urges us to seek out information or share stories of events that others would consider unsettling. Perhaps you get a rush when you hear a tale about a horrific event, but really it's the insight on how to survive if ever the situation happened to you. And thankfully, that knowledge will help you feel empowered to make choices to keep yourself safe. That is my goal. Hello, lovelies. Thank you for joining me. I'm Madame Roman. I discuss true crime, dark histories, mysteries, mayhem, and anything else that fascinate me. Sometimes I take a look at things from a different perspective. I like to delve into the possibilities of why things happen and why people do things. So if that's something that also interests you, put on your highest red bottom slippers and get ready to learn how to strut your stuff down the silver brick road to the land of wisdom. The following content contains material intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion advised. So if you're not mature, step the fuck out of line because this shit is about to get real. And if you haven't already, don't forget to support the channel, like and subscribe. Have you ever sat around the campfire at your friend's house at a sleepover and in the dark, with shadows dancing all around, someone asks, "Do you know any scary stories?" Well, the scariest stories are the ones that really happen. And this is one of them. Just as the weather was getting warmer and the days longer, on May 8th, 2008, two longtime friends decided to meet up to go fishing at one of their favorite spots, Dismal Creek, Virginia, on the Appalachian Trail, or as AT most call it. The AT stretches more than 2,000 miles from Georgia all the way to Maine. Its incredible beauty draws thousands to hike its trails every year. They decided to drive separately in their own vehicles, and along the way, in his truck, Scott saw a poor, scraggly, emaciated dog wandering in the woods. He was so emaciated that his ribs were showing. Concerned, he stopped his truck, and as he approached the dog, a man who was equally skinny and disheveled appeared. The man was friendly and introduced himself as Ricky Williams and his dog Bo. Now, after a bit of small talk, the man mentioned that he was having a hard time catching any fish. So Scott, being a kind soul and knowing the rule of the AT, that if you find someone in need of help, you help them. So he got into his cooler and gave Ricky a food trout that he had. The man thanked him and asked him where they were planning to camp. It was about 1.5 miles from Wapiti Shelter, a small wooden structure made for hikers to take shelter while hiking the AT. The man said he was camping in the same direction, and as he was leaving, he mentioned to Scott that maybe later on he would stop by the campsite. Later, while Scott was gathering wood for the fire, Sean arrived at the campsite and was settling into his tent when a man and a dog approached. As a normal response, Sean was unsure of the stranger approaching from the woods, but the man gave his name as Ricky Williams, and he said that he knew Scott. Sean eased that Scott knew the stranger and that he had never seen before. Sean was also raised on camping in these woods, and he too knew the unspoken rule to help other hikers in need, and this man and his dog fit the bill. Scott returned, and the three chatted as darkness fell. Seeing that Ricky was in no hurry to move on to his campsite, Sean and Scott decided to offer him and his dog dinner of trout and beans. Ricky regaled them with the tales of his life as an engineer and that he worked for NASA. The men listening only felt pity for Ricky and figured he was a homeless alcoholic, but completely harmless. Neither of them feared this weak, frail man as he got up to leave. And as he got up, he casually pulled out a .22 from his coat pocket and shot Sean in the head. Quickly, in the split second of shock and confusion, Ricky turned the gun to Scott and shot him, hitting him in the neck. Then he turned the gun back onto Sean and shot him in the chest. Scott, holding his neck wound, had gotten to his feet and began to run away, but Ricky shot him in the back of the neck. Sean, miraculously still alive after a bullet to the head and the chest, ran to his truck, opened the door, and got into the driver's seat. Like a horror movie, just as Sean looked up, Ricky was standing at the passenger door pointing the gun at him through the window. But when Ricky pulled the trigger, the gun clicked. He was out of bullets. Sean floored the truck to get away from his attacker, and a bit down the road, he spotted Scott coming out of the woods. Once in, Scott's wounded neck splattered blood everywhere in the truck, and he realized that the only way he was going to survive was by putting a finger in the hole in his neck. Both men were struggling to remain conscious. Sean, driving, was starting to lose sight in one of his eyes, so Scott started helping him steer. Their focus was on survival as they raced down the pitch-black, windy mountain road with dangerous drop-offs on each side. They were desperate to get help. There was no cell service, and they feared their attacker would take Scott's truck to catch up with him and finish the carnage he had started. The first 2 houses they came across had no one there to help. The 3rd house they finally came to had someone home, so they stopped the truck. Scott got out and banged on the door, yelling for someone to call 911, that they had been shot. A woman and her son came out. The woman, Melissa, had reservations about opening the door. She thought this was a home invasion or a fight between strangers gone way wrong. But her son Randy returned from assisting the man still in the truck and said he recognized Sean as having dated a friend of his. They called authorities, but the nearest help was 20 miles away. Melissa feared they would die before help could get there. After 20 minutes, she called emergency again, asking where they were. Fearing that he wasn't going to make it, Scott just wanted to talk to his family before he died. So Melissa dialed the phone, likely at a sense of loss as of what else she could do. Ambulance and police finally arrived. Sean had long lost the ability to speak from swelling in his throat, so Scott gave a description of their attacker. Randy's grandfather, who also lived at the house, immediately thought of Randall Smith, a man that had gone missing 6 weeks before. After Randy ran to the local general store for the missing person posters, Scott positively identified his attacker as the man in the photo. The police put out an APB for Scott's truck and the man that they needed to be captured. But you see, the missing man, Randall Smith, was a bit well known in the area. He was declared missing after 6 weeks when neighbors noticed mail piling up at his home and the utilities had been shut off due to non-payment. No one knew where he was, but he was not a helpless lost man. Most that knew Randall thought he had most likely vanished into the woods. To live, to die, it wasn't known. But this was not the first crime either. Randall Smith was a twice convicted murderer in an incident almost exactly 27 years earlier in 1981. They knew exactly who they were looking for. While Sean and Scott were taken to the hospital by ambulance and then by helicopter, where they would be immediately treated in surgery, the police were desperately searching the area for Randall Smith. A state trooper spotted the stolen truck and the man being sought. When Randall saw the officer, he sped off and lost control of the truck, and it flipped over several times in a possible suicide attempt. Smith was injured and taken to the hospital, the same hospital that his victims were being treated at. Randall was born June 29, 1953, a Cancer son. In his birth chart, he would be described as having a strong survival instinct, but non-confrontational, manipulative, and passive-aggressive. Timid and oversensitive, he would be observant and analyze others, leaving him feeling like an outsider, that he needed to exaggerate with superhuman aspirations to stand out as unique. With these traits, he could have been a great novelist or storyteller. Raised by his single mother, Loretta, in Pierceburg, Virginia, population 2,700, it is said that she dressed Randall as a girl. How long and to what degree isn't known. But it should not be considered as an explanation or a cause as to why he did the things he did. After all, boys had been dressed in dresses for the first few years of life, often throughout history, particularly at the turn of the century, with little ill effects because it was the norm. But some societies have moved away from any kind of femininity as a testament to manliness, which is interesting because Scottish men are considered some of the most manly, and let's be real, who of you didn't consider volunteering to have strong, intelligent, skirt-wearing Mel Gibson let him use his heavy, rolling tongue on you? God, what a tragedy. Why men great till they gotta be great? While working 2 jobs, one at the hospital, relatives helped care for Randall. He was a loner in school, not playing with the other children or having friends. He spent much of his time at home or in the woods, particularly the woods along the Appalachian Trail, which bordered his home. However, from an early age, when around people, he would tell lies and exaggerated tales of his life. He would often tell about the women he was dating and the lavish life he had in Florida and Las Vegas. When it came to lies, he was more like a Libra. He was Libra-level lying, but this can be attributed to his moon sign in Aquarius. His level was so frequent and outrageous that he became known as Lion Randall by locals. Perhaps they should have called him Pinocchio, but hey, maybe they wanted to be literal, or maybe they figured Pinocchio could use some pointers from Randall. In 1981, Randall met a couple, Robert and Susan, both social workers from Maine. They were hiking the AT to raise money for a school for mentally challenged children that Robert's mother ran. Much like Sean and Scott, they probably felt pity for him as he told them tall tales about his life that they knew weren't true. It was not until a solo hiker that knew Robert and Susan notified police that they were missing when the two didn't show up for a planned lunch date. It wasn't until then anyone knew there was something wrong. A search began in the area, and police came to Wapiti shelter after witnesses had seen the couple there. There wasn't any evidence of anything happening at the shelter or the couple until one police officer noticed a large stain in the floorboards. After lifting up one of the boards, he discovered a large stain of blood, and he knew that they were in the right location and that something horrible had happened. They continued searching and eventually found a shallow leaf-covered grave with a sleeping bag inside. Inside the sleeping bag was Susan's lifeless body. She had defensive wounds and had put up a fight to live, but had been viciously overcome and stabbed to death. Because it had been 11 days since her attack, her body was not in a condition to determine if sexual assault had occurred and could be motivation for murder. The next day, the investigators brought cadaver dogs to locate the remains of Robert. He too was in a shallow grave inside a sleeping bag. He had been shot 3 times with a .22. Because of the difference of how Susan and Robert were killed, police presumed that the perpetrator attacked them while they were sleeping and that Robert had been killed first in order to assault Susan. In searching for clues, Susan's backpack was found with the biggest clue to the killer. It was a fingerprint in blood on one of the books inside. It was Randall's fingerprint and Susan's blood. When police came with a search warrant to Randall's mother's house, where Randall still lived, they found his blood-soaked clothing, laminated pornography, copious amounts of pornography, and hospital instruments that had been made into sex toys. It's believed that he lifted these at the hospital his mother worked at when he visited her there. Authorities even found a note that stated that he had been kidnapped by 2 people and was going to be killed. The police didn't believe the note that he had written, and they knew that he had fled. Randall and his truck were eventually found in Myrtle Beach, ironically where the lead detective had gone on vacation at the same time. So much for a break. When police searched his truck, they found a note that said, "This boy and girl have been so nice to me. It's going to be a shame when the time comes to get rid of them. I will be far away when Chuck and those people are found." Motherfucker really liked to write shit down. When Randall was captured, he was gaunt, emaciated, disheveled, and covered in bug bites. He claimed to have amnesia and no memory of anything, including who he was. However, the detective, he was like, nah, we're not going to play this. So he convinced the poor amnesiac man that he should allow them to take him to the hospital because the bug bites looked so severe, and surely he didn't want them to become infected. But in order to be treated, he had to sign a consent form, and on that form, he signed Randall Lee Smith. Randall was arrested for the deaths of Robert and Susan. However, against the cries of the public and other law enforcement, the prosecutor did not believe a first-degree murder conviction with a life sentence or a death sentence penalty would be a guarantee. He didn't believe he could prove motive for the heinous crime. He didn't want to use the possibility of sexual assault as motive because the evidence couldn't prove it. Even with the damning evidence of Randall's fingerprint in Susan's blood on her book and the note found in his truck and his blood-soaked clothing. But of course, there was no DNA testing at the time to solidify his guilt. So, the prosecutor pushed the families of Robert and Susan to allow a plea deal with Randall. Robert's father was an Episcopalian minister and didn't believe in the death penalty, but he agreed that he didn't ever want to see Randall out of prison. Both families agreed to the plea deal, and Randall was convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years imprisonment for each conviction. However, this sentence was to be served concurrently, not consecutively, which meant that the 15-year sentence for each murder would be served together, not one after the other. So when Randall served 15 years, he was mandatorily released. The community was outraged, and there were actual protests. In 1996, after being convicted of killing 2 people in cold blood, Randall was a free man with 10 years probation. Many in the community felt that this was not a matter of if he would commit another crime, but when. One seasoned AT hiker protested with a sign outside the courthouse and said if Randall offends again after his release, perhaps the people responsible for the plea deal should be put on trial. The prosecutor that arranged the plea deal with Randall died 10 years before Randall's release. So when the police identified Shauna Scott's attacker as Randall Lee Smith, the news was not shocking. This was one of those surprise, not surprised moments, as Shauna Scott remained clinging to life. 2 days after the attack and the truck rollover, Randall was released into police custody and charged with 2 counts of attempted capital murder. While in jail on May 10th, 2008, Randall was found unresponsive on the floor of his cell. Medics were called, but he was pronounced dead. He had suffered a blood clot from the injuries of the truck rollover. His death did save the community from having to endure and pay for a trial and any further expenses or dealings with Randall Lee Smith. Sean and Scott would survive and live to tell their story of the encounter with the Appalachian Trail murderer. Sean still believes that Randall has other victims, as has been speculated by other investigators and sleuths after a cache of eyeglasses, knives, and women's underwear were found among Randall's things. But this is hard to determine if he stole these, he bought these, or they were trophies from other victims. So what have we learned today? Number 1, it's good to follow the AT rule. Be kind and take care of others. 2, it's also good to listen to your gut and trust your instincts. They're there for your survival. And finally, wherever you are, know how to get away. Please let me know if you have any comments or questions down below. I'm always interested in hearing what you have to say. Thank you for watching and be safe. Sending you silver streaks of wisdom.